Welcome to the Modern Drummer Podcast. I'm Modern Drummer's CEO, publisher David Frangioni, my co-host Billy Amendola, and we're here featuring the world's most prolific drummers, listening to what they have to say, and bringing to you from inside the studio the world of drumming. Billy?
Hello everyone, Billy Amendola. Tune in to some really interesting facts on the Modern Drummer Podcast.
Hello, I'm David Frangioni. On this week's Modern Drummer Podcast, Billy Amendola and I have such a great special guest, an international superstar. Please welcome Rick Astley.
Thank you so much for taking the time to do this.
Absolute pleasure.
It's amazing how life works. It's magic because I was talking to Phil Taylor, as your good friend, and I fell in love with the boys' music, the Taylor twins, who call themselves Butterfly right at the moment. But they did a song that my good buddies Billy and Bobby Alessi wrote, and I know them since the '70s when they were in a band called Barnaby Bye. And then I was just flipping around, and I saw them do "Oh Laurie," and I thought they knew them because they're a little bit obscure. And then, long story short, I got on the phone with them because I offered to help them out, do some things if they ever get to come to the States. They sent me some music, which is fantastic. And then Phil and I had so much in common. And then he just kind of mentioned that he was in one of your videos. And I said, do you know that Rick plays the drums? And he said, yes, I do. And I was like, yeah, I see him out. And the Foo Fighters, I didn't know probably until maybe 4 years ago, 3-4 years ago, that you actually played the drums.
Yeah, I mean, you say play the drums. I don't know whether I would go that far. I started as a drummer when I was a kid at school, and we used to do covers, and the Police are one of my favourite bands. I mean, one of everyone's favourite bands. But Stuart Copeland, I've met Stuart Copeland since those days, by the way, and he's an absolute hero. And as we all know, he was such an individual drummer. Do you know what I mean? And what he gave to that band in terms of rhythm and the style and everything was just amazing. So I was really into drumming as a kid, and I sort of became the singer, to be honest, just because I started to write songs and nobody else in the little band I was in would sing them. And so I kind of got to the front, and I used to play and sing. And I play and sing in a little band with some friends, and we do rock covers and stuff just for fun. And if you're a teenager,
when was this, Rick? Put us in the time.
Well, it was when I was a teenager at school, so we're talking early 80s.
So you were in high school, and and basically doing, singing and drumming, which Phil Collins, Don Henley, you can kind of count people on one hand that have done that and kind of fronted the band from the drum kit. And that's where it was kind of going at that time.
Yeah, I mean, I just loved playing the drums, and if I'm really honest, I don't think I wanted to be out front. There's kind of like a safety being behind the wall of drums and cymbals, I think. And when the gig's going great, you can be part of it. When it ain't going so great, you can just put your head down and just, So there was something about that I really liked. But I also feel that, drumming, I think, has changed a lot through the different decades. Because obviously when I was about 16, 17, maybe 18, I bought my first drum machine as I was kind of becoming the singer in a band. I've still got it to this day. It's called a Roland Doctor 55. It's about the size of I don't know what it is, but a tiny little thing.
That was early days.
Yeah, that was one of the first.
So I used to step out from the drums, press play, the guys would all join in, and I'd sort of sing a few songs from the front of the stage and then go back to the drums. But it's such a different, a different feel for one thing, but it's also a completely different sound. All those early modern, really cheap, I guess, but very still modern for its time. The sounds and everything. It was a really big swing, I think, in terms of what people would go to, like a bar or a pub or a small venue, and hear something that wasn't a drum kit that was providing the drums. And that was a weird moment for me, for sure. You know what I mean? And I don't know, it was a very strange time, I think, for drummers, I think, back then, because it's kind of like, is this it? Is our job gone? You know what I mean? So
I know, a lot of people got scared. Now, did you practice then on top of playing with the machine, or on any of the records that you did? Did you play on the drums on top?
No, I never got near playing on a record. I mean, with Pro Tools, I could do it now. But I've never, and I've actually, my studio is at home, and I've made a couple of records in that studio, and we've been, we've been really lucky. We've had some success here in the UK with a couple of those records, and it's gone really well. And I have recorded like hi-hats and things, and even a kick drum occasionally, but the idea of really getting an amazing drum sound, as we all know, and anybody watching probably knows, it's actually, I think, the hardest thing to do on a record. I actually think it's harder. I think it's harder than getting a good vocal sound. Do you know what I mean? You can get a reasonable microphone, a reasonable chain, and you can get a pretty decent vocal out of anywhere. You can do it in your bedroom, you can do what have you. Recording a drum kit is a fine art. It's almost like they're sprinkling a fairy dust that either happens or doesn't. You know what I mean? And it doesn't matter what engineer and what have you. Some days it just works better than others. There's just no way around it. It just does, So no, I never played on any of the records. And also those early records didn't have like real instruments anywhere near them. There was a bit of guitar, tiny bit of guitar, but that was it.
That was the time of just of programming, and you had the best producers in the world. My God, they took they took off after that. And just blew up the world at that point.
I mean, I was very, I still to this day think I've been very lucky in a million ways, to be honest. I mean, never mind with music and having a life from music, but I just think I met those guys, the Stock Aitken Waterman guys, and in America and various parts of the world, they're perhaps not as big as they were in Europe and other places, but in Europe, they were just, they'd have like 5 records in the top 30 sometimes, and I worked at their studio. I signed a record deal with them, or a production deal, but they just kind of got really busy, and I ended up making tea and getting sandwiches like other young guys and girls in the studio, and their thing just grew and grew and grew. But they were having like a #1 record every month, so it was weird that I just signed to this little outfit who I didn't have a clue who they were really, and nobody else did. And literally once a month they were having a #1 record, and they were going up on the whiteboard. It was just crazy. It was amazing.
Take us from the transition, Rick, from playing those gigs as a teenager and then experimenting and discovering, singing out front and having a drum machine, and then transitioning to the point where you actually did get signed by Stock Aitken Waterman and get into their studio. What that looked like, and then we'll take it from Stock Aitken Waterman.
Pete Waterman from Stock Aitken Waterman, the three producers, he was more the A&R guy, he was more the business guy, he was the mouth of the whole thing and everything, he was the leader of it really. The other two guys, Matt and Mike Stock and Aitken, they're incredible musicians. Their kind of knowledge, and Pete's to be fair, but their knowledge of the structure of songs and how to put one together and why that Motown song really works and why this really, you know what I mean? And I used to get to go to the pub with them. I was probably like 20, I think. By the way, you can drink at 20, by the way, folks, if you're watching this in America. And I would just listen to a lot of those conversations. I met Pete Waterman, I should say, that he actually came to see a band that I was singing in and a couple of other bands at like a showcase thing in the north of England, a tiny little place very close to where I was born and grew up. And he really liked my voice, but wasn't interested in working in a band, with a band. So I didn't like the idea of that for a while, but after a few months, he still kind of kept in touch, and I thought, well, okay, I'll go to London. I mean, I don't get to go to London many times in my life at that point anyway. So I thought I'll go to London and see what's what. And I think something clicked. The first time you walk into a control room it wasn't an SSL desk at that point, but it was a proper desk, you know what I mean? It had been a studio, the records had been made there. There was a couple of 2-inch machines, old tape machines, not old then, they were brand new then, but I mean, the first time you do that, and I'd been in demo studios, but I'd never been in something like that. And the first time you do that, you kind of think, maybe this is it. Maybe this is my moment, my chance, and maybe I should just have a go at this. But to just sort of put a flesh on those bones, they hadn't really had a proper hit yet. They'd had some sort of dance hits and some this, that, and the other, and a bit of recognition, but they hadn't had like a big, solid pop, conquer the chart hit. But in the lead up to, I guess, me signing to them properly, and also going down a couple more times, they had their first #1 record, which was a record ironically called Say I'm Your Number One by a woman called Princess. And they were already starting to work on the Dead or Alive record, which is the record that had You Spin Me Round on it, which is just a mega pop song. It still sounds amazing today, I think, that record.
It's still played?
It does.
Yeah, it still gets played a lot. You're right, it does. And I think because they made, like a lot of great producers do, they made a handful of records, not all of them. I think they'd be the first to say they're not all, but they made a handful of records that are just there forever now. They're not going away. Love them or loathe them, they ain't going away. So I decided to just give it a go with them, signed a production deal, and then they got really busy, so they put me on the back burner, and I just hung out and made coffee and tea and got the sandwiches. Because a lot of the time I would go in at night and I'd do the night session. And then also, one of the things that was amazing about those guys, because a lot of people wrote that they, any of the artists they worked with were like puppets and they weren't involved, and it was just like in, sing, out. And that was the case for a lot of people who worked with them. But I did loads of demos in a studio, which in that transition period was an SSL studio, brand new desk. It was like the latest, I think there were Sony's at the time, digital tape recorder.
The 3324s.
Yeah, the big monster things that came in after, and
cutting edge at that time. Cutting edge.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, first time I ever saw a Fairlight was in their studios as well, and I kind of remember that like certain guys who'd be, I say engineering, we were friends, you know what I mean? I made their tea, they made mine, but they were coming up through the ranks. But sometimes they'd be working on a record that was going to be #1 in 2 months' time, but they'd also be working on my demos. So, and I mean my demos, I don't mean the Stock Aitken Waterman demos for me, I mean songs that I wrote, you know what I mean? So it was an amazing time really, and I think I was just there at the right moment where it was still rough and ready enough. They let the kids run riot at night and at the weekends, but it really was like a workshop during the week, 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. They came in, they were at the desk at 10, they didn't leave till 10, they did 5 days straight like that, and they banged those hits out. That's what they did, that's what they were about, you know what I mean? So, yeah.
Wow, and they created a whole sound at that time. Yeah. That was their sound. Everybody knew that they were the guys who produced those records, and that was their sound. Now, going back to your drumming, what made you pick up the sticks? Like, who influenced you, and who are your influences? I think I don't know how and why and what and where, but I always
sort of gravitated towards drummers. And I think, well, I guess there's a part of that in that I'm the youngest of 4 kids. I've got 2 older brothers and an older sister. My sister, thankfully, took me to a couple of gigs when I was really young, like maybe 10, 11 or 12. We were going to Manchester, which is the biggest city close to us. So I saw Supertramp, I think, just like Breakfast in America time, when they were absolutely massive. Do you know what I mean? And talk about the musicianship. For me, they were one of those bands. And I was really young. I just knew them because my sister played it all the time. You know what I mean? But they were one of those bands that wrote incredibly intricate music, but had amazing pop songs in the middle of it somehow. Do you know what I mean? And it was like the musicianship, it was phenomenal. And also quite unusually arranged, I think, a lot of their songs. Do you know what I mean? But the songs were great. The melodies were great and the lyrics and everything. So she took me to see them, but I also saw a band called Camel, which was a progressive rock band. She was really into a lot of progressive rock. So I grew up on early Genesis and Yes. There's a band called Magma with a drummer called Christian Vander, who's incredible. He's like the leader of the band as well. So I always had drummers around me, if you know what I mean. Just I was the youngest, so I had to listen to whatever my brothers and my sister wanted. I think Yes and Genesis were definitely a bit more her mainstay. And again, you look at the way the kind of input that Phil Collins had on those records, and then again, obviously on some of the Peter Gabriel Irby stuff that he played on and his own records, obviously. That's like a drummer saying, I know I'm the drummer, but this is how I sound. This is what I do. And there's been obviously various drummers that have done that throughout the ages, but he doesn't get the credit, I think, because he became such a massive and also mainstream artist.
Right.
There's loads of people, I think, who don't even know he played drums. It's almost like a shock to see him, do you know what I mean? Play. And yeah, it's crazy. So, but again, I think when I started to listen to music, I wanted to listen to me in particular kind of thing. The Police were just amazing, I think, in every way. You know, they sort of crafted out a new way of merging 2 things together, rock and reggae and the whole, and it was just incredible, I think. If anybody does that now, it just sounds like the Police. I remember the Bruno Mars track, forget what it's called, like Locked Out of Heaven. And I remember hearing the groove of that and thinking, it's the Police. and I'm sure he knew that. He's an amazing guy. I'm sure he knew what he was doing and what, but it was, you hadn't really heard that sort of, and that wasn't reggae, but it was just the chops in it and what have you, and
absolutely. I thought the same thing. It's funny you should say that. That's exactly what I thought when it started playing, because it had that ska kind of rock push to it.
I think he's amazing, Bruno Mars. I mean, talk about people who can play the drums and you don't know about it. You must have seen him play drums or play anything, actually. But when he gets on the kit, it's frightening. It's kind of like, what can't he do? But again, I also think I think if you've been around drums a little bit, I actually think it helps with everything else. I think it helps you be a singer. It helps you be in the pocket with your own band. And the guy who plays drums with us, a guy called Simon Merry, I love the way Simon plays. And if he ever can't do a gig for us for whatever reason, which is once in a blue moon sort of thing, even though we might get another guy who I know really well and I really love, and he's a great, he just plays different. And I think that's, for people who don't play drums and what have you, or don't even play in a band, let's say, but they're just interested, it's one of the hardest things as a singer to really feel you're in it if you're not completely like this with the drummer. It doesn't matter who else is in the band. If it doesn't start there and you don't feel that, you're a bit lost, I think. It's a bit like being on, ice that's cracking. It's just not a great feeling.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And like you said before about Stewart was one of those drummers like Phil. They created their own sound. And there's certain drummers that could just sit down and play anything and they're great. But there's certain guys who influence people to play and then they create a whole sound. So Stewart is definitely one of them. And with Bruno, it was funny because Sting came out. I forget if it was the Grammys or the American Music Awards, one of those shows. Sting came out and they did that song together.
Okay. So that was like cool.
Yep. No, and I think we had spoke about this before, right, David? I think that's why so many producers are drummers for the reason that you just said.
Butch Vig, I think, he's made some awesome records, and I almost feel, again, and I can't remember where I read this, but I read somewhere a producer say that once you've got an amazing drum track, you've got a record. Everything else is just, obviously it's the music, but it's kind of like once you've got that, you're halfway there, because everything else will come then. But it's, and I think he obviously, Budge Vig, obviously that's one of his things, isn't it? Drumming, you know what I mean? That's, he's a drummer at the end of the day, and I think that's, it's just really important to him, yeah.
And that's a very good point, because as you said, playing the drums, yes, you have to have the song. To me, that's the number one. That's the key, the song. And then after the song, the vocal and the drums, that's what everybody hears. That's what everybody's listening.
Well, one of the things, when I'm in my little room, and I'm sure millions of people do this as well, I turn everything so quiet that if all I can hear is the drums and the vocal, I know I've roughly got the mix about right. That's what I kind of feel. Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of piano players and keyboard players and guitarists and bassists out there that aren't very happy about that, but...
That's great.
Well, without a doubt. And so, Rick, in those early days, you found the drums, you're inspired by Stuart Copeland. What are you playing for a kit then?
Well, I had, the first drum kit I ever had, I swapped for a leather motorbike jacket. And it was like this, it even had like 2 pigskins on it, on the toms, it was old. I think it was called like a Olympic, I think, which was one of the cheaper brands of, I can't remember what right now, but it was, this thing was, it didn't have a cymbal, it just had some hi-hats. So my cymbal was just opening the hi-hats more and smashing that. And I played that for a while. And then the band that I had with 2 friends, one of which is I'm still really good friends with and have coffee with every week still, we got a gig at our school. And we would have been 15 going on 16 at this time. I was just about to turn 16, actually, around this time. And we got a gig at the school. And my dad had a little garden centre, basically. And so we had a really big greenhouse. And we used to practice and rehearse in there. And he just thought it was just this awful noise that we made, which it sort of was, really. But he didn't really like, funny enough, he didn't really like pop music, and he hated accountants. One of my brothers is an accountant. Anyway, so when my sister said to him, you do know that Richard, as my family call me, you do know that Richard's playing at the school dance, don't you? And he said, what? He said, they're going to make that noise at the school dance. And he said, yeah. You can't go to school with that thing. Look at the drum kit. So basically he said, I'm going to buy you a drum kit. You cannot go to your school and play those drums. So
wow, your dad was that. That's really supportive.
Yeah, no, it was great. Amazing. It was amazing, considering he hated it. And so the first drum kit I got, again, I think, because I remember it being, was there a thing called Maxim that was pearl? Anyway, it was a silver. It had no heads on the bottom. It was all open. I can't know what you call that now, but no heads on the bottom.
Concert.
Yeah, because again, talking Phil Collins and that kind of era, and that was really cool at the time. I think I had like 2 rubbishy cymbals, and I think I had like 2 top toms there. I think I had a top tom on the kick, the floor, but I think I had 2 little ones. Because again, it was sort of in vogue, that thing of, I know the guy Roger Taylor from Duran Duran, he used to have those rototoms as well. A lot of people have those and Octans, and that was like a halfway house, is to have like these 2 little. And funnily enough, I know that Taylor Hawkins from Foo Fighters is sort of, he does that a lot, where he has these little, and it's almost like you've got your own little percussion thing you can go to if you really, So it was probably more of a style thing, and it just looked great to me. It was just like this monstrous silver, and so that was my first proper drum kit, really, yeah. The next band that I got into, I was playing drums, and I bought the drum machine, and we were doing that whole thing. And then when I really became the actual singer, we just said, we're gonna have to find someone to play drums. And there was a guy who was quite a few years younger than us in our little town, but we knew he was a really great drummer. So we kind of auditioned him, and he came along and really wanted to do it. So basically I just said, right, okay, I'll do it. I'll become the singer then. And that's what happened, because I was sort of beginning to write songs quite a bit at that point. I was really into the idea of trying to do that. And so I was quite happy to sort of give up. No, I wasn't happy to give up the drums. That's the wrong way of putting it. But I wasn't going to be able to do both Do you know what I mean?
It was an evolution of sorts, because you can realize the singing and the songwriting side and really tell the story of the song, which it sounds like that was really burning desire.
And also, even at that age, even at like 16 to 18, 19, I kind of sang then sort of the way that I did when I had my first hits and what I do now. I just had quite a big, barrely sort of like voice. And it just sort of worked. And I think you could see the reaction of people when we played in local pubs and stuff. You know, they'd actually put the pint down and go, "What the hell's going on?" You know, so it kind of worked, I think. And so I was sort of sold on the idea. And there was a part of me still that did not want to be the front man. But yeah, it's something I've still struggled with today a little bit sometimes. But
did you realize, though, what a fantastic singer you were?
What I realized was that when I sang in front of an audience, I think there was also a bit of a shock value, because I looked about 12 years old, but certainly didn't sound that. So if you married that with the right kind of songs, which we were doing a lot of covers, and then we were trying to write things that, you know, a bit like the covers we were trying to, you know, it sort of worked, and I could sort of see that and feel that. I definitely knew something was going on when I opened.
There was a magic, because you had that blue-eyed soul, and it was a surprise factor when people.
Yeah, but also, you know, my hair's a lot darker now, but I had red hair, freckles, and I looked about 12 or 13, but I sang the way I did, you know, and that I think was a happy accident, and it just worked, you know. So
it's amazing, because I was playing in cover bands when you had your first hit, and so we would learn the song. This is, you know, MTV's just kind of coming onto the scene, and it's, you know, where to get a song, you had to capture it on the radio and hit record on your cassette, Absolutely. You know, on your recorder, your boombox. So it was, you know, real early days. And I remember we learned the song, and in everybody's head, you know, it was this like burly R&B kind of vibe going on. And then we saw the video, and we're like, oh my God, this is like a totally different, you know, image of what we expected.
Funnily enough, that first record, Never Gonna Give You Up, it went to #1 in the UK, and it took about, I think, 5 or 6 weeks in those days, you know, or sometimes longer, but this record took about 4 or 5, 6 weeks. So I didn't go on TV properly, really. We hadn't even made a video. So it was working from the radio. It wasn't working from, and we had a couple of things that were a bit weird. One of which was that I went to do some club PAs, and I went with like 2 or 3 guys from the record label, and from, I think somebody came from the production company as well. There's a bunch of us, you know, and I was green as grass, and I didn't know what was going on. So we're going into nightclubs and stuff. And to be honest, like 2 weeks before, they wouldn't have probably let me in the nightclub at the front, because I wasn't cool enough, if you know what I mean, to go to a cool club in London or what have you. So we're going around the back, and we're going in the back way, and the 2 guys on the door kind of let everybody in and didn't let me in. So they all got in there, and then someone looks around and says, "Where's Rick? Where's Rick?" And they're sort of saying, "Oh, we didn't think he was coming with you. We just thought he'd be coming later, because, you know, he said, "No, that's him out there." He said, "That white dude out there, that's him." And it's like, "Yeah, that's him." And it's like, so a couple of things like that happened a couple of times. And then we made the video in the week that it went to #1. So it was kind of strange, I think, in a lot of ways, that, especially in that era where the video was so massively important, we had a #1 record. I mean, I'd been on Top of the Pops, actually, the big sort of, you know, music TV show we have here, or did have here. But it still was doing pretty well before that. So I think people just bought into the record because of the sound of it, not because of the way I looked.
Oh, and your vocals, I mean, you're one of the best singers in the world. There's no ifs, ands, or buts.
Thank you. I'll take that as a huge, huge compliment. Thank you.
How did the whole Foo Fighters thing come about?
Well, I'm lucky enough now that I get offers to do things in different parts of the world, you know, and we were asked, did we want to play at Summer Sonic, which is obviously one of the huge festivals in any part of the world, but it happens to be in Japan, obviously, but it's a really big one. So that was a no-brainer. We just wanted to do that anyway. And then they said, "Oh, by the way, Foo Fighters are headlining." I'm like, okay, because I'm also thinking that's the strangest eclectic mix of music I can possibly imagine, but fine. And I'm a big fan of theirs anyway, because, you know, they just happen to have 2 of the greatest drummers in one band, which is a bit weird, but what can you do? But they're just a great band anyway. I mean, they made some amazing, well, they keep making amazing records. And yeah, so anyway, we went to Japan, and we didn't see their set on the first night because of timings and all the rest of it. So when we got to Tokyo, we just said, my wife and I, we just said, look, we said to the band and the crew, we're definitely going to get as close as we possibly can. You know, we're going to get either in the sound booth if we can or wherever. And then one of the amazing things about those guys is that they kind of, I think, have a policy when they can that if you're working, you're part of the gig and you're there, then you can just come and be on the stage. You know, I'm sure that doesn't happen in every single place that they play, but they're pretty open about it. You know what I mean? They don't have this kind of like, oh, don't look at us. Do you know what I mean? In sound check or what have you, which I have experienced with certain bands, but we'll not. And so we just said, right, we're just going to get on the side of the stage. When are we ever going to get to do that again? This would be amazing, you know? So we're at the side of the stage and we're just watching them do their thing. And it was like crazy. There's like 60, 70,000 people in a baseball stadium. I'd had a few beers at this point as well, because I played a couple of hours before this, you know. And then Chris Shiflett, one of the guitar players, came over. So we all moved because he was saying hello to somebody. So we all moved out of the way so he could do that. And he gave this guy a hug and they had a chat. So anyway, they're still playing, by the way. They're still on stage. So then Dave Grohl does the same thing. He starts walking over. So we all moved out of the way thinking, obviously, he knows this guy as well. And then when Dave sort of came over to me and said, I'm Dave, and gave me a hug. So,
wow.
So I'm like, it was one of those like comedy sort of movie moments, you know, where I kind of looked at my beer thinking, what is going on? So anyway, I just thought, well, that's really nice. You know, they didn't need to do that. That's really lovely just to come and say hello. So they're playing. Then 20 minutes later, one of the tech guys comes over. He sort of hands me a microphone, pulls the barrier away and says, the guys want you on stage. And I'm just like, for what reason? Why would they, you know? And then I'm just thinking, whatever, just go with it. So I walked out there and I walked over to the center of the stage and Dave gave me a hug and I shook hands with whoever I could reach and said hello and all the rest of it. And then Dave just whispered in my ear, in front of 70,000 people, we're going to do your tune, but it's going to sound a bit like Smells Like Teen Spirit. And I said, of course you are, Dave. So we'd never met at this point. I had no idea. I knew they knew the song. I did know that because they've got an ongoing thing with some people that they have a thing with, and they used Never Gonna Give You Up to protest against this. It's a church that has done some protesting against them, and I'm sure you know about it anyway. So I knew they knew the song because I'd seen something on YouTube about it. But I didn't know they knew it. I didn't know they actually knew it, you know what I mean? But it turns out that they'd learnt it to play on a TV show in like a sort of a fun sort of moment thing. But I didn't know that at the time. I had no idea what they were going to play. I had no idea what it was going to be like or anything. And it's just like they just kind of steamed into it. And the weird thing is, because somebody sort of said at one point, oh, he was trying to be really rock and roll. I wasn't trying to be anything. I was just trying to be in the moment. So I just screamed at the audience. Am I allowed to swear on this, by the way?
Yeah, sure.
You sure? I won't do the whole thing. I basically screamed at the audience, come on, you mother, right? Because I didn't know what else to do. I just didn't know what else to do. And
that's rock and roll.
Yeah, so we played the song and it was just fantastic. It was just such an out-of-body experience. I'd had a few beers as well, but I'm just looking around. And also, but the weird thing is I'm sort of trying to take it in because two of my closest best friends, one is a producer, one is actually a voiceover artist. And we have a little punk rock covers band that we do charity gigs. We couldn't get away with it because we're not that good. We couldn't get away with it if it wasn't for charity. So I play drums, we have bass and we have guitar. So we murder a couple of Foo Fighters songs and loads of other people's songs, right? So I'm sort of looking around going, the boys are never going to believe this. So it was so funny. Anyway, and we had a fantastic night with them afterwards. You know, they were their crew and the guys themselves were so great with our crew and our band and everything in terms of, you know, we were way down the list in terms of people on that lineup. Do you know what I mean? But it was almost like, you've been working, you're allowed here, you're okay here. Do you know what I mean? And that was just really nice to see, you know, because some people aren't like that. Some people are complete arses, and it's like we're the headline act. Don't even look at us. You know what I mean? So
yeah, no, we know
just
that.
a great experience, and you know, they've invited me to go and do that thing a couple more times in different parts of the world, and it's just been a really fun thing to do. And I never take it for granted. I don't think that just because I'm going to go and see them that I'm going to end up on stage ever. Obviously, it was just a fun moment in time, and it was just great, you know. But like I say. You look round at that band and you kind of think, you sort of realise, that's one of the things that I really like about bands who will do that, is they don't know me. They got no idea what's going to happen, what I'm going to bring to that. They're not bothered. They're just like, let's steam into this. This is why we're here, isn't it? It's to just rock and roll. It's just to have some fun and play songs and just live it and feel it. And do you know what I mean? And I just think, how great not to care that there's 70,000 people watching while we do that.
Hey, it was your moment just as much as everybody else's. So
yeah, it was great. It was a real special thing. I think it definitely filled my batteries for quite a long time in the thing that rock and roll is definitely not dead. You know what I mean? Because you hear all these stories about that level of band where they don't like each other, they don't talk to each other, they don't, you know, all of this, and they play a set like this and it's all on a computer anyway and blah, 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 you know what I mean? And then you find out, actually, they just rock out, you know, it's like, that's great. It really filled my batteries definitely to see that. So,
and I'm sure they're huge fans of yours.
I think we had a fun night, you know, and as I say, we've done it a couple of times, and I just think, yeah, it was a really, really fun thing to do. And yeah, but I mean, again, what a crazy band to have those two guys. You know, all of them are obviously incredible musicians, but the fact that they've got two of probably most people's favorite drummers in one band is, yeah, it's almost a bit sinful in a way, that really, but there you go. Yeah,
they've won the Modern Drummer Readers Poll a few times, actually.
I'll bet. And again, they're both very, very distinctive drummers. It's kind of yeah, it's a tough one, that, I think, you know what I mean, because they're very, very different, you know, and yet they both have something that you know makes them both tick, I think, you know. So
Rick, I know you're a great songwriter. And you've written a lot of songs. Tell us about your first album and who wrote, you know, the songs and, of course, your big hits.
Rick wrote "Hold Me in Your Arms," which is a beautiful.
Yeah, I wrote a couple of the ones, and I had a song called "She Wants to Dance with Me," which is a top 10 in America as well, in different places. And I co-wrote a song called "Cry for Help," which was, I love
that song.
Thank you, and I think that's had, in its own bizarre, strange way, it's not had the life that obviously Never Gonna Give You Up has, because that's just nuts. But it still sort of gets played a bit, that song, because it just sort of works in its own, I don't know, anyway. So, but when I met Waterman, I kind of knew that if I wanted to get any sort of songs onto a record, I was going to sort of have to sort of get it by him. And I understood that, and I was okay with that, because they were trying to build their Motown, if you know what I mean. So I say Motown, it's not really fair to judge them in that way, because Motown had some of the greatest singers of all time. The idea of artists really writing their own material wasn't what they were about. And I understood that, and I was cool with that. I was a kid. I was just like, like I say, you have to have the perspective that I had, which was that I met these guys. They hadn't had a bona fide proper big hit yet. I'm like, yeah, okay, let's just make a single and see what happens. That was my feeling. It just so happens that in the next 6 months, they had about 5 #1 records. So it was a bit like, okay. Pete Waterman wanted to sign me to like a proper major label, and so we went to see the guys at RCA that I signed to, which eventually became BMG as well, part of their umbrella, and now is Sony, I think. Somebody owns them. But when we went to see them, the guy there, a guy called Peter Robinson, who's head of A&R, said, well, I really need to see Rick sing. I mean, and you keep telling me he's great, and you keep telling me he's got this, I'm going to have to hear him sing. But we hadn't really recorded anything. So Pete said, right, come by the studio on Friday. So I'm like, this is going to be interesting. So then on the drive back, you know, and Pete and I are in the car and we're driving back, and he said, right, you're going to have to go home. I was going to do his accent then, but anyway, you're going to have to go home and get your 4-track demos that you've got, because I hadn't done demos at the studio really at this point. I'd done a little bit of this and that. Take the vocal off them, because I said to him, look, I haven't got backing tracks. I never thought about making a backing track. Why would you, put a 17, 18, 19-year-old kid make a backing track in 1980, whatever? It's just, So I went home, got the vocals off, came back, and I sang to my songs in the reception of the Stock Aitken Waterman studio. And so the guy from RCA said, who wrote these songs? And without missing a beat, Pete Waterman just went, he's a great songwriter as well. so I basically ended up with 4 songs on that first album.
Wow.
And on the second album, I did what the other guys in the building were doing, which was we heard massive global records and said, how do I do my version of that? That's kind of what they did. Do you know what I mean? Not the Stock Aitken Waterman guys. I think they did carve out their own thing. But all the other younger people were just, people do it to this day. We hear a record and go, okay, I know where they got that from. You know what I mean? But so I did write some of the songs that got on the radio eventually and stuff. But the first couple of the really big ones, they were both #1 in the US as well. Never Gonna Give You Up and Together Forever. I didn't write them. And I don't have any, I wish I'd written them in terms of the publishing, but in terms of what those songs have done for me in the life that they've given me, and the fact that, you can still go and sing that song today and it still kind of gets a reaction and still kind of works and what have you, what I mean? I'm just lucky to have been, I think, in a moment where that song came about, you know what I mean? So
for your own songs though, do you write on piano, guitar?
I do a bit of both.
What's your process?
I do a bit of both. I don't even class myself to this day as being an actual musician, but for instance, I've made 2 records in my garage where I've played every note of everything. I just take my time, and because I'm writing it, I'm not doing things that I can't do. You know what I mean? And therefore, and I almost think there's sometimes, I even think some of the greatest records that I have loved, the limitations of the people who made them are what make them great. If it was virtuoso musicians all pulled in from LA, London, New York, what have you, it'd become something else, because they'd be going, well, that's really boring doing that. What's that? You want to be doing this, and it sort of loses something sometimes. And if you think back to, I don't know, we're talking about early drum machines and early synthesizers, some of those early records like that were absolutely amazing, because the people who made them had no clue what they were doing. It was all from instinct, and it was all from a love of making a noise, and it just being, that's a great noise. How do I make that into a song? And I'm a bit more advanced than that now, but I do just literally just sit at the piano until I find a bunch of chords I kind of like. And I can't really tell you what they are. I can't tell you how I came about them, and I can't tell you why that chorus works after that verse. I don't have that musical theory at all. It moves me, so I sing. And then once I've sung and I like that, then it's become a song. So, and every now and again, what I do is I will strip something down completely. So even though I've done a track for it, I'll just leave the vocal there and completely start again. So I'll pick the guitar up instead of the piano to see, you know what I mean? Just to see if there's something else that I would have done. Because like I say, I can't literally transpose from piano to guitar. I've really got to think about it. I've got to go, what the hell did I play there? What's that root note? Why is that note there? What's going on here? And then I pick up the guitar and I kind of work that out eventually. I'm not a proper musician, but in its own way, there's something in that is, I don't blow my own trumpet, but we had a #1 album in the UK in like 3 or 4 years ago with a record I made in a garage, and I played everything. So it's I'm a firm believer in, sometimes when you see like a young band, just don't overproduce it, and don't squeeze out of it what is actually great. You know what I mean? So, and I think it's easier to do that in pop music, because I think pop music is the domain of the big producer and the big DJ producer and all of that. But when you've got a rock band or you've got an indie band or what have you, the sound they make in that garage, the first, embryonic stages of it, is the sound that people will react to, because it's different, because they made it. You know what I mean? So,
and it's coming from the heart. It's coming right from the heart.
Yeah.
And
there's no wrong in writing it either. You know what I mean? That's one of the things, to be honest, that I do like about a lot of the records that DJs make sometimes is, I'm not saying they all are like that, but sometimes you can hear that shouldn't be there. That note is completely wrong, but it brings such attention and a tension that is incredible. And I don't think DJs are scared of doing that. They'll just throw it in and go, God, that really brings the hair on the back of my neck. You know what I mean? So
it may not be musically correct, but it's still feeling and emotion.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of the rap music, when they were sampling things, they were on keys and everybody was just pressing buttons and they created a sound. So
totally.
One thing, in your studio, which drum kit are you using what setup do you have in your studio?
Well, I don't play real drums in it. I've got a couple of different drums. Our drummer Simon has just moved to Natal, and so I went to the factory with him. And I'm almost embarrassed to say this because I'm not a drummer really, but I got a drum kit as well. And I've always wanted a what used to be Vista Light or Perspex drum kit. So I got a Perspex one, and it sounds amazing actually. We Simon and I, when we got back to a rehearsal room and set the kits up again properly and everything, because he set up his touring kit that he has, if you know what I mean, just to go through it all and everything with his tech and get all the tuning and all the rest of it. So we set my drum kit up as well, just for fun, because we hang out a bit together. So I'm just playing it, just going, how does it sound this good? Because I always heard they don't sound that great. It's like you've got to really work on them, but it sounded amazing straight out of the boxes. So hello. I've also got a DW that I actually bought from a pro drummer quite a long time ago now. It's a gold sparkle. And I was just floating around on eBay, just looking at old drum kits and different guitars and stuff. And I saw this thing, and it was what they call short stack tom-toms.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And it just looked amazing. And I just thought, even if I don't buy it, I have to go and have a look at that. So I contacted him, and I went to his lockup basically. And I just thought, I just have to buy that drum kit. It's talking to me. So I really kind of like that, just because it sounds great. It's got quite a small kick drum to it. I think it's even an 18 or something. It's really small, and the sizes are small until you get down to it. It's got two floor toms that aren't, they're not on legs, they're on a stand, if you know what I mean. I've also got an old drum kit, a very old drum kit, which is a Premier drum kit, which I believe is the one Ringo had before he had the Ludwig that we all know. And it's like a sort of, what I would call Formica, like a plastic sort of brown mock wood covering to it.
Right.
It's not in perfect condition, to be honest, but I just really like it. I don't even mind if it's in if it's in our house and it's in the living room or it's wherever. I quite like it because it's funky. You know what I mean? It looks cool. Almost like a bit of furniture rather than a drum kit.
Yeah, drums. Well, drums are like guitars. That's why somebody picks up so many guitars. I have people sit next to me at a concert and they say, God, another guitar. Why did pick up another guitar? Well, same thing with drums. You want that classic 70s sound. You go for that certain kit. You want that 60s sound. You go for that certain kit. So it's important.
I think for me, one of the things that, if you're doing tracks at home and stuff, I've got an electric kit, and I kind of MIDI it up so I can, I've got loads and loads and loads of sounds and different programs and all the rest of it. And it's never going to replace drums. And if I ever want real drums, then you've got to record some drums somehow, one way or another. But one of the things I think it's great for is that I can program drums, and I kind of know what things should do and all the rest of it. But it's one thing doing it like that, or even doing it like that, and it's very different to just be on the song and just kind of go, you know what I mean? And just feel, that felt good. And even if it's not perfectly in time, I just still throw it in there, and then it adds a bit of something else to it all of a sudden. Do you know what I mean? So I'm not one of those people who's like, it has to be real drums or else it's not a record, or, it's not the real deal and all that. Because I think if you actually closely looked at a lot of records that you even think are real drums, they're not half the time. They're just really, really well put together. Because like we said earlier on, it's so difficult to get a really great drum sound. It's really, really hard. So I'm kind of all for throwing anything in there really and seeing what makes the sound you want to make, I use Logic. I do everything in Logic, and I don't go into Pro Tools until we're going to mix something, just because I never really got to grips with Pro Tools. I know it's incredible, it's amazing, but I just never got to grips with it. And the more you spend time on one, it's just harder to go to the other side. And I think, I'm 55, so when I saw the sort of move to computers and the way Pro Tools went, it was obviously very much, this is the engineer's world. and something like Logic was very much, this is for musicians. You know, this is where the keyboard players are gonna, and this is what, you know. And so I just kind of stayed with that. It's pretty amazing, Logic, I think. I mean, when you think today, I don't know what it costs now, Logic, if you go and buy it, but it's I don't know, it's a couple of $100 in it or whatever it is.
Oh, yeah.
It's insane what you can do with it.
Very affordable.
Yeah, and what I try and do is I have a few I guess setups that I go to if I'm going to go in for a coffee in the morning and just turn my gear on, I have a few things that are already in there straight away, i.e. a decent I have like 4 different guitar setups, 2 acoustics, 2 electrics, just so I can go, okay, there's a clean electric, there's an electric with a bit of grunge on it, just so I don't have to start going what, because for me, like I say, I don't even count myself as a musician. I can work on that, and I can work on that with someone later. I just want to be able to play something. So I have a couple of different pianos set up as well. I have a programmable bass, but a really good sounding one. But I've got a really nice Fender Jazz that I've had for years, and I really just like the way it feels and sounds. So in other words, I've got my own little band in the room. It's just I play it one by one, if you know what I mean. And that's the record. I made a record when I turned 50, and that's the one we had the #1 with. And I made that record. I hadn't made a record for years, and I just felt, you know what, I'm turning 50. I'm not going to go and do something crazy, you know, like get divorced and get a younger wife and do all of that. But my midlife crisis will be, I'll go and make another record, right? No one may hear it, but I'm going to make a record. That's what I said to myself. And then it just sort of grew into something else, and then it grew into, you know, something great. But when I went in there, I bought a new computer, I set up the room slightly differently, and I said, the instruments I've got in front of me, and the ones obviously in Logic as well, but I've got a real piano as well. So I've got a piano, I've got a bass, I've got a lot of drum sounds, I've got drum kits, I've got mics, I've got the stuff. I've sort of said, whatever's in this room is my band, this is it. So the bass sound on pretty much every one of the tracks is the same bass sound. It might change a little bit, obviously, and then in the mix it might change with a bit of something. But I'm saying it is the same bass, and it's going through the same channel, and the effects, that's what it is. Partly because I kind of feel, well, that's what bands used to do. He's the bass player. That's the bass player he plays. That's the, you know, he has an Ampeg. Well, that's what he does. And therefore, I kind of wanted to do that for my little garage project. And so that's what I did. And also one of the things that I find really frustrating, I might be at a friend's studio at some point and I'll be, you know, on their computer just looking around and doing what have you. And I think, right, there are 5 million synth sounds. I'm already like, I need a coffee already. Do you know what I mean? So I kind of feel, I'm not being purist about it, but I just kind of think you can get lost in that. And I think for certain kinds of music, you need to get lost in it because that's what those records are about. You know what I mean? It's the experimentation of all of that, and eventually they get this thing. But I'm not like that. I'm much more, if you can sit at a piano, pick up a guitar, and then sing it to somebody, then that's the world I sort of operate in a little bit more, I think. However pop it might turn out, that's how it's born, if you know what I mean. And that's kind of how I like to stick. So.
And you don't, and you're a great songwriter, and you are a great musician. So we're going to tell you.
I'm all right. Honestly, believe me, I'm not. You can get away with murder. If you turn the lights down low enough, you can get away with murder these days. Well, I know the caliber of the people that I work with, you see, and I appreciate that I work with them. And so I find it sometimes a bit strange to say to Adam, who plays guitar in our band, and sort of say, look, that's the part. That's what it is. Because I know that he's capable of doing anything. But he then comes back to me and sort of says, yeah, but that's what makes it funky. I'm not like that. I'm not John Legend. Do you know what I mean? I ain't going to do that. You know what I mean? No. I like to be in a dark room on my own, press play and record, and have all the time in the world to get it right. You know what I mean? So. Well,
that's the thing, too. I mean, you don't have to do it. People want to see you. When they see you, they want to just see you on stage singing. And you know, that's what they want to see. But in the studio, it's great. I love the way you put it because you don't have to waste time. You have it set up, and that's a great analogy the way you said about, well, that's the same sound, but because if you were in a band, that's the way it would be. And I love that you have it set up that way because when you go in to create, you don't want to be thinking about, I got to press this button, I got to do this, I got to hook up this wire now.
Absolutely.
You lose concentration. You're not writing the song. You're
and also because I think we're so lucky with the way that you can make music today with computers that you can replace it pretty easy. You can do things. You can, you know, I think in yesteryear, it was a bit of a thing to kind of say, we're going to redo all of this on that. Sometimes that was a bit of a sort of a frightening experience to try and recreate something, or sort of say, well, we love the way the piano sounds, we're just not completely sure about the part. And you go, well, it sounds exactly the same today as it did. You know what I mean? It's a lot easier to do that today, I think. And I think, you know, people are so much more involved sometimes in their early stages of their careers about recording and writing and even producing their own. I mean, look at the Billie Eilish thing. You know, they made a record in a bedroom, probably the biggest record that year or what have you. But they're so involved in making that record. And again, you know, I don't know much about the pair of them, to be honest, in terms of their musical. Obviously, they're extremely talented. I'm not debating that, but I'm saying their sound is quite unique, I think, and I think to me, it sort of feels it's born of the fact that they're really close and they made that record without loads of people watching them make it and kind of sticking their oar in. Do you know what I mean? Right. It's unique to them because they made it in a bedroom. You know what I mean? And I think so many more people get a chance to do that because of computers today.
Well, listen, I know we can keep you all day, so I want to thank you so much for taking the time to do this. I mean, we're all big fans of yours. We've always been.
Thank you.
And
well, I want to say thank you on behalf of Modern Drummer and your millions of fans out there, and thank you, Rick, for sharing all that insight. And a lot of people had no idea of your connection and passion for the drums, and really the beginning of all of this started, you know, on the drums.
Everybody should start on the drums, as far as I'm concerned. Everybody, I don't care.
There you go.
Start on the drums. And then move on to, so you should have to do a month-long probation on drums. I think.
Drum Probation by Rick Astley. I love it.
Man. Thank you so
Thanks, guys.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you
have a good one.
So much.
Thank you. Pleasure.
Bye-bye.
Cheers. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, everybody, for tuning into this podcast. Billy Amendola, David Frangioni. Such an honor to host Rick Astley. Had so many drum tidbits. Who would have known that someone who's had such a prolific career as an artist started out and really at heart is a drummer. So everybody stay healthy, stay strong, keep drumming, and we'll see you next time on the Modern Drummer Podcast.
Thank you everyone for tuning in. Stay hydrated, drink your hint water, and we'll see you soon.